Thank you, everyone, for being here. He introduced me already, but I'm Lisa Freeline, Lisa Freeline, Deputy Procurement Officer for the Department of Procurement Services. As he stated, I'm the Deputy over Community Engagement and Intergovernmental Affairs. I'm excited to moderate this panel because we're going to talk about some amazing things, which includes diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is very prevalent right now, and especially when it comes to returning residents. Our panel is made up of two of our assist agencies, and if you don't know what assist agencies are made up of nonprofit organizations and Chamber of Commerces that work, they advocate for small businesses. So we have two of those here today, and we also have one of our construction companies that does business with the city, as well as the mayor's office. And so without further ado, I'll introduce our panel. We first have up Willette Benford, who's the Director of Reentry for the Mayor's Office. Next, we have Jane Valinga, Executive Director of Chicago Women in Trade. Next is Manny Rodriguez, Founder and Executive Director of Revolution Workshop. And last but not least, Bob Gallo, Chief Operating Officer with Power Construction. Thank you all for being here. I would like you all to tell a little bit about yourself and the role that you play in your respective organizations.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Willette Benford. As Lisa said, I'm the Director of Reentry at the Mayor's Office, and I'm also a returning resident, which is someone that is directly impacted or otherwise known as... I got a loud voice. Did y'all hear me? Right. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and use the mic. But I am directly impacted, which otherwise is known as formerly incarcerated. We choose to use the term returning resident. I oversee the Mayor's Interagency Reentry Council, which is an all-of-city government approach to reentry. All of our agencies and sister agencies create goals to see how they could best support returning residents. Also, my work has three components: the Interagency Reentry Council, policy, and also programming.
Good morning, everybody. Jane Valinga. I'm with Chicago Women in Trades. Chicago Women in Trades is a 42-year-old tradeswomen's organization founded by and for women in the trades, aspiring tradeswomen and current tradeswomen. And we do many, many programs to prepare and support women in these careers. So we do pre-apprenticeship training, welding training, actually many different kinds of pre-apprenticeship training these days. And we also have mentorship and retention programming. And it's a community of tradeswomen all there to support one another. I brought our very own expert with us today, Joplin Allen, our board chair and journey-level ironworker, who can speak very eloquently on this topic. But the trades do not pose that many barriers to returning citizens, or residents if you prefer. And so there are a few exceptions to that rule, but in general, these careers are open to returning residents. We have successfully served them and are always looking to increase that number. So I'll pass it over to Manny.
Thanks, Jane. I'm Manny Rodriguez, again, Executive Director of Revolution Workshop. We haven't been around quite as long as CWIT. We've only been around about 4.5 years. We run a pre-apprenticeship construction training program for Black, Brown, and women in the city of Chicago that want to get into the trades. And we also provide a slew of alumni and retention services, wraparound supports that are very critical when you're helping residents that may have barriers to entry, one of them being that they may be a returning citizen or resident. About 70%, 75% of our folks are justice involved. So we have a lot of experience in this. And like Jane said, one thing that I do value about our sector is that it is friendly to people that have maybe made a mistake or two in their life but want to turn it around. So I think we'll dive into those things a little bit more in detail, but with that, I'll pass it on to Bob.
So Bob Gallo with Power Construction. We do more work in construction than anybody right now. We're not the biggest because most of our work is just here, but we've hired over 30 folks from organizations like CWIT and RW and others, many who are returning residents. And it's been a good journey for us. It's a great learning opportunity over the years. We also support their organizations. We've done a lot of advocacy on their behalf, bringing other contractors, competitors, clients, institutions, for not just us hiring them, but trying to promote that concept and bringing more folks to the table. Because we have to, there's plenty of supply, as you know, right? And that's what we're trying to do, is create more demand for that.
Thank you all. So I'm going to ask each one of you a question, and then I have some general questions for the entire panel, and then I'll open it up to the audience in case you all would like to ask our guest any questions. My first question is for Willette. In November 2021, the mayor signed an executive order to assist returning residents from incarceration and released a roadmap for a second chance city. What can you tell us about the plan, and what accomplishments have you achieved thus far?
Yeah, the mayor released that roadmap. It came from a returning residents working group, which was made up of government officials, faith leaders, community advocates, returning residents, and we all came together to look at what were some of the challenges of returning residents, and also what were some of the recommendations that we could make to the mayor. And out of that returning residents working group, we knew that there was a need for economic mobility, good health care, housing, and also educational opportunities. Excuse me. And what happened was there was another recommendation that there be a direct connection within the mayor's office to the community, and that a role should be created, which the role was created. I was hired in May of last year, and what we've done thus far is we pulled together the mayor's interagency reentry council. She made that by executive order. We meet bi-monthly to, first of all, go over our goals, to see what type of goals organizations and also city agencies can make to support returning residents. And we came together in January. We've met like 4 times bi-monthly, and now we will begin to release those goals in 2023. We had like 17 agencies to participate and draft goals for 2023 to support returning residents. A lot of things that we've done happens around DFSS, because they really do a lot of the reentry work. So for instance, we allocated $1.2 million to the community reentry support centers. We currently have 4. We will be also allocating more money, because we know that a community reentry support center is more likely where a person will go when they come home, if it's in their community, to get the resources that they need. And also we are looking at changing different policies within the mayor's department to make sure that the harmful policies that were created can be rectified, so that returning residents don't have so many barriers when they come home.
Thank you. My next question is for Jane. The number of women moving into the construction industry seems to be growing. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's growing at a snail's pace. I think we're up to about 4% right now. And so I've been at CWIT personally for 22 years, and the organization is 42 years old. I will say that this is a particular moment right now where we can push the envelope on equity from many different directions. So at CWIT, we are ramping up our direct service programs to prepare more and more women to take advantage of this kind of moment of opportunity. At the same time, we want to push our friends in government to set and enforce goals for women. Because without that pull, the fear is that we can make some progress right now, but will we be able to sustain it? So I think that, yes, I'm optimistic for sure, but I think any contractors out there, please be intentional about hiring women for your jobs. If you are in a position to be a leader in this at a contracting agency, or if you are a policymaker, legislator, this is the time There's going to be a workforce shortage. We should be successful if we cover all the bases. So right now, busy getting people ready to enter, and looking forward to a great period of time here.
Thank you. Next up, Manny. Your organization is doing great things in the world of training and workforce development as it relates to construction. What motivated you to start such an organization?
Yeah, I think personally, you know, I'm born and raised in the city of Chicago. I come and have a little bit of similar lived experience to some of the folks that we have served. And I was fortunate enough to have some people that I met along the way that looked out for me and provided me opportunities that changed my life. And so on the personal side, I wanted to make sure that I was always doing something to making sure that I was helping and paying that back and paying it forward. I think, you know, in terms of workforce development, I think it's important when we're talking about violence and we're talking about poverty and we're talking about equity. I think what you said, well, yeah, really resonates with me. We need to be able to provide economic opportunity. We are a capitalist society. You have to be able to make money. And one thing that construction allows is for family-sustaining career pathways. And that's why, you know, I decided to go all in on saying, okay, I'm going to help people, train them. They don't have to have a 4-year degree. They can get a 12-week pre-apprenticeship program. I can partner with somebody like Bob, get them into an entry-level track, into an apprenticeship, and they earn and learn as they go. And that's the kind of strategies and kind of models that we have to uplift across all sectors, quite frankly, not just in construction. And so that is why we focus on construction. That's why we focus sector specific. And that's why, you know, it's really, it takes, I will echo what Jane said too, it takes a village, it takes more than one person to be able to really be diligent about wanting to recruit and retain people of color and women. So.
Thank you. Bob, Power Construction has been around almost 100 years and is a leader in the construction industry. How did Power get involved with working with returning residents, and how have you moved the needle in the training and hiring of formerly incarcerated people?
So, you know, we've been doing partnerships with diverse-owned companies for several decades now. That was a pretty mature effort. The realization over the last, say, 6-7 years is that even though the minority contracting piece really has made great progress, the labor side, the numbers haven't improved at all. And as Power became larger and more of a credible player in Chicago, and as you know, in some regards, you know, we're in a bit of a leadership role just by sheer sense of scale now. Even though when I started, we were very small. It was kind of the realization that, hey, if somebody else is doing something, we sure as hell can. And so the first thing we did was try to educate ourselves by professionals like Jane and Manny and others in terms of finding a pipeline for people. And then the more we partnered with them, the more we realized that with our relationships and with our networks and with our resources, that we can help support them and help advance what they're doing and create a stronger network. As you know, I don't want to go into too much detail, but right now we're trying to create opportunities for more transitional employment, because a lot of people coming from these programs are job ready, union rigor apprenticeships. Right? It's a high demand, right? The pace, the expectation. It's a big leap for people that never worked construction, never worked physically before, might never had you know a traditional day job before. And so now we're talking about people going from that to that expectation. So we're actually trying to create more transitional opportunities. We're working a deal with Habitat for Humanity to use their construction sites, their home builds, as workforce training opportunities to give a little more runway. So not just a 12-week program, but then to add something on there to make real-world experiences. So there's a lot of different ways we're supporting them, but I think collectively, I think that's one of the, that's collectively is what we really have to do to really move the needle.
It takes a village. These next few questions are for the entire panel, so anybody feel free to jump in. We know that returning residents face challenges when it comes to economic mobility, access to health care, and access to housing. Tell me why you think it is important to hire returning residents.
I'll take that. Well, everyone here also is talking about women. You know, women are normally the primary caregivers for their children. And so a woman that is incarcerated, you know, and even black women make up 14% of the Illinois adult population, but over a third of those that are incarcerated. And so coming back into the community, women are the breath of the community. And so when you hire a woman, you not only hire the breath of the community, you hire someone that is going to provide for her children. Her children will see that she's able to provide for them. You can never imitate what you don't see. And so when children see their parents doing and getting up and having a job that is a livable wage, you know, not rent insecure, not bill insecure, you know, not food insecure. When children see that, they can imitate that. And so I think it's very important to hire women, especially women of color, because normally those are the communities that have been historically disinvested in.
Go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say here, here.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I just want to say this, you know, I've done this both on the construction side and run a workforce program on manufacturing. Manufacturing and construction sectors share some of the same similar challenges when it comes to looking for talent and having labor shortages, et cetera. Not a lot of people are showing the authentic pathways, middle-class pathways that are involved in both of these sectors. I will tell you, in both of those experiences, my trainees that had a background that were returning citizens outperformed those that didn't. And I can't stress that enough. I think that there is something to that when you get out, you don't want to go back. And you're motivated. You have an extra motivator. And then you couple the fact if they have a family and they need to provide and there's an urgency there, those folks will run through a brick wall for you. And so I want to make sure that every employer, and if any employers are in this room, that you know that this isn't about giving back just to be nice. This is going to actually make up a business need for you. You're going to be hiring a very dedicated individual that's going to be very loyal to your company because you gave them the chance. And so that's what we've experienced, higher placement rates, higher retention rates from the folks that, again, that are returning citizens. I just wanted to put that up.
Anyone else want to chime in? You sure? Okay. What does the landscape look like post-COVID? Has there been a significant shift in the number of individuals seeking training and/or opportunities?
Go ahead, Jane. You go first. You go first.
It's Jane's turn.
I just wanted to say that I think people took some time during COVID to step back from their low-wage service jobs or very stressful low-wage medical jobs. And I will say we are having zero problem recruiting for all of our expanded classes. So in the last couple of years, so prior to COVID, I think we were serving a little less than 120 women a year in our programs. And this current year, I think we're going to be serving about 200. And so far, knock on wood, we are not having any trouble recruiting. So I think that the COVID has provided opportunity for people to kind of reimagine their careers to something that is less abusive. And so yeah, we're seeing lots of people.
If I could speak to the market, so post-COVID, the economy in construction is strong, right? And yes, the interest rates will have some influence and some negative influence on it, but the headwinds are very strong. And so you're not having any problem recruiting because there's so many people that need this opportunity. The public sector is one that gets a lot of attention in terms of diverse contracting or goals for people from socioeconomic areas and for minorities. But the drum I keep beating is that public sector is great to focus on, but the private sector is far greater. And the more we can create opportunities in the private sector, the more we can they can absorb people and give people opportunities. And so from an industry, I think the opportunities are there. I want to give a shout out to the mayor's office because we've been in discussions of modifying that 2017 executive order that the previous mayor did to introduce private sector jobs for minority contracting. It touched on labor, but it never got a whole lot of attention. There's never been more opportunities for minority-owned companies, but if we take that same approach and add in more specific goals for any job that goes in front of a plan commission, that it says, okay, how are you going to introduce new people? How are you going to support new people into the business? You're going to see that the demand for workers increase drastically. And so that's one of the many things that are in the works. But I think you don't have to worry about the industry, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I would just echo Jane's comment about recruitment. We actually expanded to a second site during COVID. So that's because so much demand for the program. And again, working with employer partners like Bob has allowed us to say, okay, yes, there is enough of the demand here to make sense to even open up a second site. I think with the challenges with COVID, and I do want to highlight this, we have to remember that this is a global pandemic, right? And we already were facing, a lot of barriers and traumas in our communities. And that pandemic only made it worse in our communities in particular, right? And so has that trickled down, I think, into some of our metrics, like we're not graduating the same percentage? No, we're not, because we're seeing that some of these traumas are very real, and an organization like mine or Jane, we can only do so much, right? Because we talked about some of the barriers earlier: housing, childcare, transportation. Well, I'm not a housing organization, neither is CWIT. We're not transportation. Substance abuse has been on the rise, right, in our communities. And so these are challenges that, again, it takes a village. We have to be holistic in our approaches so that we can, again, provide the adequate wraparound services so that we can move people down the pipeline. I think that is very critical, and if we're asking a COVID-specific question, I want to make sure that we highlight that.
Thank you. You all are walking the walk, talking the talk, doing great things. So how do other companies and organizations build a more diverse workforce when it comes to minority women and formerly incarcerated people? Like, how do they begin that path? Like,
So if I could, so we're only one company, can only hire so many people at a time. Bringing more companies in and showing them there's awesome opportunities, there's awesome resources here, and that they don't have to feel like they're taking on a person with whatever that situation is with that individual on themselves. And so the reason these two organizations are here, because they're two of the best that provide that full wraparound services. And so in the George Floyd era, as horrible as all that was, the number of companies, the majority-owned companies that we've paraded through, the number that have been truly, genuinely interested in hiring and supporting, genuinely, not there because we may be a client of theirs, drastically increased. So that you said this is a moment to take advantage of. We've seen that firsthand. Is that absolutely? We just need to connect these dots. That there's resources and there's organizations that if you're an employer, you're not in it alone. And so we've had people that started with us that we didn't give enough mentoring or didn't pay enough attention to some of their barriers outside of work, and that hurt their success. And so we've learned that we have to step up our game, but we've also learned to keep communicating with them because they have a relationship with these individuals. And say, hey, you know what? This person is struggling They haven't confided in us yet, but there's obviously something happening that's hurting their performance. Can you please check in on them? And we've salvaged a lot of employees that way by teaming up and addressing the needs.
I think also, Lisa, in answer to that question is being intentional. Being intentional about who you hire, being intentional about hiring women, being intentional about hiring people of color. You know, and a lot of times being intentional about hiring returning residents. You know, Manny alluded to it that some returning residents are his best employees or the best participants. And the reason why is inside, returning residents are required to have an assignment, get up every day and run the prison for all 3 shifts. And so you come home with that work ethic, but you may not have all the soft skills and all the wraparound services that you may need, and you may be one flat tire away from losing your job. Or you may be one babysitter calling and saying, I can't make it, from losing your job. And so really being intentional about fair chance hiring practices, and also being really intentional about the wraparound services that you provide. And how are you going to support a returning resident that is an exceptional worker, exceptional, with whatever other wraparound services they need to ensure that they are set up for success and not failure.
Are there employers in the room? Contractors in the room? Yeah?
There we go.
Excellent. Yeah, so what she said about being intentional, this is a completely achievable goal, but it's not going to just happen. Especially, you know, you're working in the union trades, you know, you're going to get who they send you or who the workers on the site refer, and they probably will be the same people. So I think that call Chicago Women in Trades or Revolution Workshop, and we can certainly hook you up with qualified people. Chicago Women in Trades has been doing this for more than 40 years. We have a big database of journey level and apprentice tradeswomen from virtually any trade. So we can certainly source people for you. So I think it's important to figure out who's doing the hiring, how are they doing the hiring, can we do something a little different from how it's been done before? Are there any policies or practices that serve as barriers to women and people of color or people coming in through an alternative route? I think retention is also very, very critical. The culture of this industry can be incredibly toxic for women and people of color, right? And so how are you creating an equitable, harassment-free work site that allows all of your workers to thrive? And believe me, anything you do that benefits women and people of color benefits every single person on the job site.
That's right.
Nobody wants to be bullied.
That's right.
Nobody wants to experience any of that. So if you are able to create an inclusive, respectful, harassment-free work site where everyone is free to contribute at their very highest level, you're going to have a much more productive workforce. We provide technical assistance, we can provide training, we can help you evaluate your process and provide best practices and language for developing policies. And so we welcome your partnership.
Yeah, I think with me, I also wanted to say that partnership, that word is what I always go back to. For the workforce agencies in the room or other nonprofits, if you're looking to get into workforce, if you don't have authentic relationships with the employer, you don't have a workforce program. I need you to hear that. Both of our organizations have full-time staff that are just dedicated to talking to the Bobs of the world. And that is important because it is a partnership. It's not just a one-way, hey, we're feeding this to you and you got to take them because there's some goals on a project. This is not the way that you actually retain that talent and support that talent. It has to be a partnership, a two-way street. I always say that we run on a dual customer. So my customer is Bob, is just as much my customer as any returning citizen that comes through, as any woman or person of color that wants to get into this field. because he's the end customer. If I'm not providing the entry-level talent that he needs, then I failed anybody that walked through my door anyway. So that's why we have to do this in collaboration. For the employers, again, emphasizing, we're a resource for you. It doesn't stop once I just place them. You can come back and say, hey, so-and-so has been great, but all of a sudden they've called off twice. What's going on? Well, let me find out. When we call them up, and they're embarrassed to tell you they lost their housing, right? They're embarrassed to tell you that as the employer, so you don't know what's going on, but they'll tell me, and then, by the way, I'll help them find housing. We avert disaster. Now you have still a good person that wants to still work for you. I actually think somebody in that particular scenario is working for Bob right now. So that's the kind of things that we are talking about, examples of what we're talking about in terms of partnership and viewing us as a resource, and that it takes all of us working together.
I just want to piggyback off on all of it, actually. My name is Jazz Allen. I'm a 21-year member of Chicago Women of Trade. I'm also a 20-year member, local 1 iron worker. And I was just noticing that sometimes when you are a returning citizen or returning resident, we tend to say those and those people, they're human beings that are falling short, all right? And here at Chicago Women of Trade, not only, just answering your question, not only do we invite anyone, any woman, we're the only tradesperson that has women in our name. That means we specialize women, for women by tradeswomen. Not only in our office or as our staff or in our board, we have tradeswomen and returning citizens on it. Because it's one thing to represent me, but it's one thing for you to allow people in your office that represent us as well. When it comes down to going into the field, and everyone says, well, they having a problem. First of all, and I want to be clear, you can't take someone that want to commit suicide here and say, oh, wow, we have an opportunity here. It's a pathway. So at Chicago Women of Trade, we're building leaders over there. We have women in leadership positions to where we have a women trades council. What we're doing now is we have women that are BAs now, something that never existed, right? We have women of color that are internationals representing carpenters and bricklayers right now. So it's more than just attaching myself to him. Because if you come to Jane and say you're having a problem, now we have women for that. I don't need you to report, oh, he's having a problem, because what the problem was, you haven't dealt with the issue before he got there. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm gonna be sure, but it's just at Chicago Women of Trade, you build a career, you join a sisterhood of lioness. And I tell Jane all the time, female lions raise male lions in their family to be lionesses and lioness. Don't forget that. So as they were coming back into society, we're still those lionesses. And I always take away the mother and the father, and we're parents, and we're providers. So instead of reporting to him, talk to him as a man. Talk to her as a woman and see what's going on in the situation. Then refer to him, because now you just institutionalize the same situation. Now you're going to go tell the warden what's happening, right? So when it comes down to Chicago Women of Trade, which I'm also a board member of, it's a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jazz. My next question is, there are a record number of construction opportunities in the city of Chicago, and that will continue to grow. We know we have the airport expansion, we have Invest Southwest, and the Obama Presidential Center. How do women, minorities, and returning residents obtain the training and skills they need in order to compete for those jobs?
www.chicagowomentrade.org. Got lots of classes planned for this year. Please connect with us. Absolutely.
Ditto, except www.revolutionworkshop.org.
And St. Paul and St. Leonard's and Rebuilding Exchange and
There's a lot,
Iman.
there's a lot.
There are so many opportunities.
But I do think that there is an importance, outside of just us giving you guys a commercial. I think Jane said something earlier that I want to highlight again. This sector is a little rough, all right? It is, I like to say it's stuck in the caveman era. There's a lot of Neanderthal behavior that happens on a job site. We're all working to change that. I will tell you that. This is one of my closest partners. I consider them, just mentors and friends. we are trying to change that, but that's not going to change overnight. So somebody needs to come through an organization like ours first. And I love what you said, Jazz. You know, women, I refer women to CWIT all the time. CWIT's women refer some of their men to us all the time because we know what our respective organizations can do to adequately prepare that individual for the pathway and to, again, provide those critical supports. It's not, you know, it's all nice to do the training, right? And everybody wants to fund the 12 weeks, but the real work doesn't begin until they're placed. That's when the real work begins. And so how do we break cycles of poverty? How do I get you to buy your first car, your first house, start your own business? That's breaking the cycles of poverty, right? That's when the real work begins. So that's why sending them through organizations like ours, it's very important because there's a reason why you have a pre-apprenticeship. We're preparing them for that apprenticeship pathway.
I just want to say one more thing. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I just want to say one more thing, and that is that it is completely doable to get into an apprenticeship program. So I think that one of the things that people outside the industry think is that it's not possible to get into a construction apprenticeship program unless you tick a bunch of boxes that they don't tick, right? But it is. And so, it provides a pathway. Staying on that pathway is challenging, but it is a pathway that leads to wages of, more than $50 an hour at this point with full benefits. And for the right candidate, this is an opportunity that doesn't come along every day. So don't give up on the apprenticeship program system because it's challenging. We have gotten, I think last year we got 80 women into apprenticeship programs. And so, and I think there's like 20 already since January 1st. So especially at this time, great opportunity to start a career.
I just wanted to touch on something that Jazzy said about creating leaders, and not just a job, but really creating leaders and then having leaders to be the voice of the organization. And that is something that really resonates with me because if it is an organization like, All Women's Trades? Chicago Women in Trade, right? I'm gonna wrapped all the names up. Chicago Women in Trades, that they are developing leaders, and anything that goes on, if it is a breakdown or a problem, that there's someone in the organization that can address that. And also with you too, Manny, I just really appreciate that because when you develop leaders, leaders develop other leaders. That's right. And other leaders beget other leaders. And so it's just replicated. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you. And we talked about apprenticeships and things of that nature. Is there a role that unions can play?
Yes.
Go ahead, Jane.
So one of the great things about this time is that everyone is worried about a workforce shortage. So we've been able to do some things over the last year that I would not have thought were possible a few years back. So we're running one of our pre-apprenticeship programs now includes a week of training each at the carpenters, electricians, ironworkers, and painters programs. We're also going to be doing some trade-specific programs. So next month we have our second all-women's carpentry pre-apprenticeship program starting with 20 women, which, knock on wood, will all graduate and join the apprenticeship program together as a big class of women, which is a huge step forward. Later this year, we're going to be doing a pre-apprenticeship program with the Ironworkers District Council, and all of the graduates will get direct entry into one of the locals, Local 163 or 444. These programs were a long time in coming, building these relationships. But I think just like we were saying about the contractors, the unions too have the ability to do something intentional. That's right. about changing their demographics. If you do things the same old way, you're going to get the same old results. But you can look at what is your selection process, what is keeping diverse applicants from joining our union, and make those changes. Or is there a way that we can go outside that irregular application process to find those candidates and bring them in? And a certain number, certainly not all, a certain number of unions are actively working on that at this time. So again, lots of optimism. Right?
So there are, I call them the big four, laborers, operators, carpenters, and electricians have been the most visible and the most helpful of late. Trying to get more unions to follow their example is something that we really push for. And because we're signatory to several of those unions, it's easy for us to have that relationship. To pipe fitters and plumbers, we're a nobody, right? So bringing the people, the contractors that are hiring those folks, right, the big mechanical contractors, bringing them more to the table and using their influence with the unions is helping as well. But it's not perfect. There's definitely room for improvement.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Lisa.
No, go ahead.
I agree that it's not perfect. And I will be nice because typically everybody that knows me knows that I'm not so nice sometimes to the unions.
Go ahead, Lisa. You can. Next question.
But, I do think, again, intentional. And some locals have been very intentional and have worked with us very closely. And some are doing window dressing. And so they need to be called out and they need to be held accountable like anybody else. So I don't think we do that enough. I think sometimes we tiptoe around it because we don't want to offend them. But I'm not that person, so I'm going to be very real about this. I think one of the biggest thing is we can get them in, and sometimes the retention piece is challenging. And I think that, one of the biggest benefits to being in a union is that you have an advocate. Well, at least that's what it's supposed to be. But sometimes when you're a person of color or a woman, you don't have that advocacy the way it's supposed to be. And so I just think that we have to look at it as if you're a member of that union, then everybody's equal and everybody's a member of that union. And again, we got to call out, we got to be intentional. We got to also call out the bad players, but I will also do a little kumbaya. Things have changed a little bit, so.
And with that, I'll open it up to questions from the audience. We have one in the back. We'll bring a mic back there.
Before we get into the Q&A, I just want to let everyone know, as soon as we're done with the Q&A and the panel ends, if you want to hang tight, we are going to do our next Chicago Bulls raffle. So we'll bring the Bulls rep in here to draw a name. Hopefully that winner will be in this room because it'll be more exciting. But just to let you know, if you have a raffle ticket waiting, the drawing will be in a few minutes.
Absolutely. How you doing? My name is Bruce Spells. I am a local 130 plumber. I am an apprentice outreach plumber. So the thing about it is there's a lot of changes coming. And it is very Neanderthal, and a lot of the old rules stand, but people are trying. Now, when you're trying and you're making adjustments, what happens? Things change, things differ, budgets, and remember, this is people's money. This is people's livelihood that is changing. Some people are not prepared for change, so are also pushing back. Now, with me being one of the new recruiters that was hired by Mr. Anderson, the new Chicago coordinator, he made it very clear that he wants to help. He wants to try. I've done countless and a lot of events, but the one thing I always notice is sometimes the parents, us, are not pushing our kids to those events. They don't know the value or who's actually there at those events. So when we show up and there's a low count and the head boss asks, hey, how many kids showed up to that event? I can't come back and say only 10 kids showed up. Because guess what happens? Next year, when the budget for me to get paid and things happen, guess what will happen the following year? So please push everyone to show up. Please, we're here to help. Trust me, I'm here right now trying to figure out how I can help, and I'm also starting my own plumbing company. Now, I went to a pre-apprenticeship program. One of the greatest things that ever happened. But the one thing sometimes we lack is, if I needed help as a young man in my apprentice program, the Women in Trades hit it on the head. Y'all program is absolutely amazing. Sisters had a chance to turn to somebody and say, hey, I am struggling in math, I need help with this position, or I need help, blah, blah, blah. Can someone help me? And they had a force behind them, pushing them forward to complete the program. So many men like myself did not make it through my program because we had no one to turn to. So sometimes as groups, I need you all to come together and create one group. Because once again, who do I really have to turn to for help? Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to.
And we have a question right here. You want to respond?
Well, I just want, I hear you about the youth piece. I think we lied to 2 generations of kids and said college was the only way. And, it isn't the only way. Obviously, I just talked about manufacturing and construction, something that, when you asked that workforce question earlier, I usually give that on my soapbox. We haven't been around as long as CWIT, but trust me, we are helping our young men of color. In particular, because we know exactly what you're saying. They needed that support, they needed that backing, and I'd love to talk to you offline, because me and Jane didn't even know you existed until right now. So let's make sure we can make that connection.
Not only didn't we know you existed, but we didn't know you had a new coordinator. So, yeah.
Sure. Hi, my name is Telly Safford, and we have a really small construction company, but we are doing a pre-apprenticeship program that's based on mostly carpentry, where we're diving out into the other trades. We partner with another nonprofit for the soft skills portion of it, so it's a back and forth. We talk a lot, we partner a lot, and the challenge we're having is building enough of a network to place our apprentices. So it's like, do you have any tips, any tools, any of the courses on how we start building those networks? Because we're small. So trying to get out and ask people, hey, we have apprentices, they've been with us 6 months, let's get them placed. It's just kind of a little bit hard to kind of go out to other construction companies and say, hey, we have some guys and gals, and they've really learned a lot, and the feedback you get is like, oh, okay, but I kind of want somebody with the experience already.
Let's talk afterwards. We can help you.
Okay.
Thank you.
But I would also tell you, in terms of the structure of the program, I don't know if you caught earlier when I said we both have full-time staff that are dedicated to networking out to those contractors. You got to have that. Like, it's almost impossible to do this if you don't have that person. Well, we call them employment specialists, job developers, whatever. Every agency calls it slightly different, but you need to be able to have that person. And then, I definitely would welcome you, picking Bob's brain. Bob's been tremendous for us, but he's a large general contractor that's a leader in the industry that's saying, you know what, I'm going to bring all my subs to Revolution Workshop and to CWIT. That's what he's doing, right? And so if you can find those other larger general contractors that are bought in and already understand why this is important, they can become your Bobs. And that, to me, I would just tell you from a person that just started 4.5 years ago. I mean, now we've placed a person, we've had about 220 grads, we've placed a person with 95 different companies. Like, it takes time, it is not gonna just happen like this. Some days, 1 month you're gonna meet like 25 new employers, and then you might not meet another employer for, 2 months. But that's just the way it goes. And so, but stick with it, make sure that that's a partnership, make sure that you're incorporating those employers into what you're doing, because then they know that they have input, and then there's buy-in, right? If they're giving you input on what the training looks like, now they're going to be more willing to say, oh, okay, well, you know what? I'm already sitting on this advisory council, whatever it is. Well, now I'm going to take them, And then if I don't know anybody, maybe I might know somebody else that has it. So.
Yeah, that's great. I think I understand exactly what you're saying. we're in Chicago Women of Trade, we do have a big network. But it's dependent on what you're doing. And some things that people are saying, it's a thing called union and non-union. You can train 1,000 guys, you're not gonna walk on a union site. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not gonna just say, okay, I was the foreman for a few companies at the Brookfield Zoo, and you come to me like, oh, Jazz, I got a guy, and they're great and this and that. I said, I got a guy too. I got a sister too. It's not as easy as just walking on the job site. I want you to get up with power too, because he's a man of his word, and I think he can give you a little bit more insight. But getting out and networking, seeing what you can do and what is possible and what is feasible, because what you don't have, what I heard you say was apprentices. You don't have apprentices. You have pre-apprentices. They might be apprentices in your program, but to us, they're pre-apprentices. They're non-skilled union guys. So you can talk to power, but it's just depending on just getting out networking and getting to meet some of the guys that's up here.
The non-union sector it doesn't pay as well, but it still creates awesome transitional employment opportunities. I would love to see everybody eventually get into the union just because the scale and the skill level is higher than most, but there's still many other opportunities as well.
Hi, my name is Patricia Epps, and I am an electrician. I came through CWIT, Chicago Women in Trade, and as someone who's non-traditional, I started at the age of 48, and I've been including the apprenticeship and as a journeyman, it's been 8 years, and then Chicago Women in Trade was the year before, so it's been a total of 9 years. Chicago Women, I couldn't be here if it wasn't for CWIT. And being an older student, I knew to make the connections. I knew what I wanted. Even when I walked in CWIT, I knew what I wanted. And so saying one of the other things that the young man said back here, at CWIT, when we were preparing for the electrician's exam, there was a young man who actually came and studied with us, which surprised me because it was Chicago Women in Trade. But the door was open, and so maybe a partnership in that aspect, because he was the only guy in the room. And ironically, when I started my cycle at Chicago Women, not Chicago, as an apprentice, he was in my cycle, and we're still friends to this day. So saying all that to say, I could not have been here without Chicago Women in Trade, and so a pre-apprenticeship can make all the difference. It prepares you for what you don't even know you need to know. It got me ready. My math, I was always good in math, but we reviewed the math. It got me ready for what I have not experienced, which was the open, they said, where you were worried that you were gonna be treated poorly because you were a woman. I was blessed not to experience that, but we read the stories, we heard, all the stories, so we were prepared when we went out there. And it just arms you with things that you don't even know. There's an 11 weeks of unpaid apprenticeship the first year. You have to prepare for that. Chicago Women in Trade helped me make it through those 11 weeks. So I can say, I mean, when I saw Jazz and Jane, I came out, I was networking, and I'm like, oh, I gotta stay, because I stand on their shoulders, and I can only say good things about CWIT.
Thank you. So we've talked a lot about the importance of engaging minorities, women, and especially returning residents. So with that said, I'm going to turn the mic over to Jackie Umbles, who's with the Department of Procurement Services, who's going to introduce Kimberly Britt. So I just want to get a show of hands of how many folks have had the lunch already. Not many of you? I'm sorry you were in here, huh, when they were serving. Well, you're in for a treat, because we not only walk what we not only talk what we do, but we walk what we do. And we have Kimberly Britt here, from one of the owners from Shy Fresh, who they also are part of the reentry community as well. And the food is phenomenal. Her work ethic is phenomenal.
stop by their booth, see them. When I heard about them, I did my research first, and then I went and tasted it, and then I thought you should have it.
Right.
So with that said, I'm gonna let her speak.
Hey, everybody. So, I'm Kimberly. Oh, okay. Okay.
We want you to see, go out in the light. Go out in the light.
Go on in the middle.
I don't want to take y'all shine. So I'm Kimberly Britt. I'm one of 5 co-owners of Shy Fresh Kitchen, and we're located on 71st and King Drive in the Grand Crossing area, Greater Grand Crossing area. And our company is consumed of 5 formerly incarcerated individuals who ran into the barrier of a background check and not being able to find a decent job that served a livable wage. So we got together with a consulting firm called Upside Down, and we created Shy Fresh. Within Shy Fresh, we make fresh food daily. We serve institutions, daycare centers, schools, private schools, as well as anybody who wants to be fed. But right now, we're trying to expand, okay? It's only 5 of us in our company. We right now have 2 employees, and we want to see our 60,000 square foot building filled with individuals who ran into the same obstacles that we ran into on our way up out of being incarcerated. So with that being said, we want to start an apprentice program as well, just training on inventory, culinary skills, packaging, delivery driving, and just being able to serve and reconnect with our community, because we're not the stigma that's placed upon us. We want to show people that was then and this is now, and we have a future. We have a future, and we want to be able to open those doors to other individuals who also can't believe that they could be a business owner. I didn't believe it at first either. I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I thought that I was just gonna come out here and work and get a check and start from there. But God blessed me. Thank you, God. He blessed me with this opportunity, and it's not anything that I take lightly. So you guys enjoy the food. If you know anybody in the Chicagoland area that wants good, fresh food that's made daily, our doors are open. We have cards at our booth where you can contact us. We're looking for any type of financial support so that we can be able to hire on more individuals who are re-entering, and to knock that barrier down a little bit at a time, okay? So thank you all.
And what I will say about them, you know, when we started this journey together, Kim and I, you know, there were certain things I wanted, and they said, well, you know, we only buy from Black-owned businesses and so on and so forth. So they also talk the way that they do. So they walk the walk, exactly what they say they are, very professional individuals. And I think when you go out and enjoy their food, if you haven't had any, I think you will feel the same way. So thank you, Kimberly.